apologize for being late this afternoon because I have meetings. So we have a delay around 20 minutes. Sorry for that. Okay. Good afternoon to student of Dr. Nadhrah Kadir from USM, and also to all my students at UMY here. Yeah. Dr. Nadhrah.
Ini kelasnya hanya ibu saja.
Oh, saya saja. Oh iya. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Nadhrah, this is actually a blended learning because we combine online learning and at the same time I also do my offline class today. Yeah. So thank you very much for being sit in my class here. I hope we can have a productive discussion during this meeting. Okay. As what have we discussed in our email, that I would like to give the subject on new public service. Okay. Oh, yang isi Dr. Nadhrahnya. Oh iya. Yeah. Dr. Nadhrah. Hello.
Hello, yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So since this is the first time that you will teach our students, so this is your turn to give us lecture on new public service. So
Right.
I hope my students, all of you, my students, there are online students here and also offline students here, around 12 students here that will follow your class this afternoon. Okay. Please, time is yours, Dr. Nadhrah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Dia. It's good to see you online. So my name is Nadhrah. Actually, I don't have my students here today. So basically, I'm just lecturing your students, UMY, I guess. So I think we have about 30 plus students online. But I'm not entirely sure how many of you are offline, but it's okay. So, so again, my name is Nadhrah. I'm from a School of Social Sciences at University Science Malaysia in Penang. So I just want to check whether you can see my slide or not. Can everyone see my slide here?
Yes, it is visible.
Yes, okay. All right. Okay, good. So so let's begin our lecture. So I guess maybe a little bit of introductions about public service or public administration. So I quoted Hager's definitions of public service here, in which he defined public service as how the administrative parts of government are organized, process informations and produce outputs in policies, laws, or goods and services. And then I think most importantly, it's not just understanding about the definitions of public service or public administration, but I think more importantly, we need to understand the goal of public service and also public administration. So in general, the goal of public service is to serve the people or the society well, regardless of race, religions, background, such as, political affiliations or economic status and things like that. So that is the main goal of public service. So I usually emphasis on this role to my students, so that most of my students, especially at the master's level, they wanted to become a public servant. And so I think that, to be a public servant, you will need to understand why you want to be a public servant or civil servant, which, you have to understand the goal of public service itself. So I think this is the main goal of public service. And for today's lecture, we are going to talk about new public service, which is more of the theoretical aspect of public service. So for next week's lecture, we are going to talk the practical aspect of the new public service or NPS in terms of public participation. So today it's just very theoretical. So please bear with me, because sometimes when we talk about theory, it tend to be very dry and very, sometimes tend to be boring, but please bear with me, okay? So first of all, let us, there are many common issues in public service, right? And so I have two short videos here that I would like to share with you all about the common issues in public service. Okay, sorry. Let's see if I can pull out this. Yeah. All right, can everyone see this video?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
But there is no sound.
It will be, yeah, now it starts now, okay?
Espera un momento.
Quería darme de alta en autónomos.
Ventanilla de información, modelo TA1. Lo cumplimenta en esa mesa y después.
He traído relleno.
No ha rellenado esa casilla. Vaya a las mesas de la entrada y...
He traído 2 copias, escritas y revisadas.
Falta el impreso de Hacienda. Y la fotocopia. Muy bien, Rubita. Tú lo has querido. Fotocopia del DNI. Número de cuenta. Fotocopia de la tarjeta de la Seguridad Social. Fotocopia de los impresos de Hacienda. Doble fotocopia del modelo 036, numerado y grapado.
Okay, so what do you think this short video is trying to portray? Can anyone guess what this short video is all about?
The complicated steps of bureaucracy in every public service facilities. Basically everywhere then. I thought it's only in my country, but everywhere.
Yeah. So have you heard about red tape? So red tape is a common issues in bureaucracy or in public service. You know, like the video, the short video is trying to portray that, you know, if you were to get a service from government agencies, there are a lot of things that you have to do. Like, for example, you need to fill in form A, form B, form C, so many things, right? So that's what we call red tape. So this is a common issues not only in Indonesia or in Malaysia, but also it persists throughout the world, you know, especially in developing countries. Okay. Okay, where is my PowerPoint? Okay, let me, all right, share my PowerPoint again. I think I lost my PowerPoint. Okay, hang on a sec. Okay. Right. Is it this one? Sorry.
It's okay. Take your time, ma'am.
All right. Okay, I think I just closed my PowerPoint. Let me try to pull it again. Okay, so this is what happened when you have to deal with, you know, technology, and yeah, it happens. Okay, let me see this one. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you for, you know, for waiting. All right. There you go. Can you see now?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Good. So I'm pretty sure, I forgot to ask. I think I can assume that most participants in this class are public administrations or government studies students. So I'm pretty sure that you have some idea about you know, what public administration is all about. And so when we talk about several models or theories of public administrations or public service, we usually start with the basic, which is the traditional public administrations or public service. So these, this is sort of like to refresh your memory about traditional public service. So I listed down a couple of what we call elements or characteristics of traditional public administrations or public service. So the first one is it's very bureaucratic, which is identified by hierarchy. So usually the traditional public admin model is very, you know, if you go to government agencies, everything tends to be top to down approach. Okay, so and also you will see sort of like a hierarchical or hierarchy chart. You know, you have the top level management, the middle level, and the lower level of civil servants. And it is also a closed system, which means that usually when we talk about a closed system of public agencies or public service, it tends to limit the participations from the lower level, also including the citizens, okay? And then the second criteria is the standard operating procedures or SOPs. So you will have lots of SOPs, lots of rules and regulations. And the third one is in terms of the politics and administration dichotomy, which is it tends to advocate for two separate entities when it comes to public policy, such as policy making and also policy implementation. And usually public service just focus on the what we call implementing the public policies. And the fourth one is in terms of motivations of civil servant, which is essentially boils down to the public interest. And lastly is the traditional PA model is consists of civil servants who are professionals, neutral, which means that they cannot really advocate for any political parties or political inclinations, and also anonymous. Okay, so these are the characteristics of the traditional model of public service. And then moving on, this is sort of like evolutions of theories or concept in public service. And then after, a lot of scholars, when they talk about traditional public administration or public service, they notice a lot of limitations. And so this is when scholars introduce new public management or NPM. Okay, so I'm not entirely sure if you have heard about this model, but I would just briefly explain what NPM is all about. So NPM model was introduced during the I think late 70s up to 1980s. Okay, so this model is actually what we call, it has the cluster of ideas and practices of the business, okay, and also private sector. So which means that, because of the limitations in traditional public service, and so these scholars, they said that why don't we adopt the principles and elements of private sector to public sector. So this is what NPM is all about, trying to bring the ideas and practices of private sector to public sector. Okay, so that's why you will see, here you will see things like, run government like a business, or make government work better and cost less. Okay, so this model, similar to traditional PA or public service, it wants to achieve the efficiency and effectiveness of public service delivery. But the approach is very different, in a sense that they adopt the private sector practices and ideals. I'm pretty sure you have heard about privatizations, right? So where government services has been it's been privatized. Certain things. I'm not entirely sure privatization in the context of Indonesia, but like in Malaysia, we have government services that have been privatized, such as telecommunications, some of the public transport, and then postal services. So those are originally the public service, under public service, but then when a government adopt these ideas of NPM, they privatize those functions in public service. Okay, so the third bubble here, as I mentioned earlier on, the intentions of NPM is to find new ways, new and innovative ways to achieve better results. Because people always contradict or compare private sector and public sector, isn't it? And so a lot of complaints, usually, like I show you the short video just now, because of a lot of red tapes. So NPM, the advocates or the those proponents of NPM thought that, if you were to adopt the principles of private sector to public sector, then perhaps public sector can be more efficient, more innovative like private sector. But of course, there are a lot of criticisms about NPM, which I'm not going into, but because we are talking about NPS, right? So NPS, basically, it came about because of this new public management, and to some extent because of the traditional public service model as well. It is sort of like the so-called alternative for NPM and traditional public administration. So the model of NPS is actually very normative. What it means is that it is just a model and theory of what should happen in government. Okay, so when we talk about empirical study, whether government around the world, including developing countries like Malaysia or Indonesia, whether they have adopted some of the elements or principle of NPS, I think they are in empirical study as well. So like, for example, I quoted Light study, which what we call, he did a study on, I think on the upper public servants when it comes to NPS, but his study is also very limited. So from his study, he notes that the new public service is actually more diverse, okay, in terms of diversity. It involves non-government agencies or NGOs, and public servants have a deep commitment to making a difference in the world. So these are some of the gist from his study. Okay, and then Denhart and Denhart actually in 2000, maybe I think they published a book in 1999 or 2000 about NPS. So I think these scholars, they are the biggest proponents or advocates for NPS. So they, characterize NPS as more of normative model. Okay, so they listed several characteristics or elements of NPS. Okay, the first one. So if you look at these characteristics, they are very what we call, it's sort of like the counterpoints for NPM. Okay, so and I think that is the reasons why they came up with this model, because for them NPM is very lacking in certain aspect, and that's why we are proposing, this new model, which is NPS. So if you look at the first characteristic or criteria or element, it means it says that the model is to serve the citizens and not customers. Because if you remember when I briefly explained about NPM, is about private sectors. Usually private sector, they address their clients as customers, right? But for NPS, we don't see people or society as customer. Okay, we see them as citizens. So it is much more complex than that. Okay, seek the public interest. Okay, so NPS is more concerned about public interest. Okay, what is public interest? Okay, they try to contradict with NPM in the sense that, when we talk about NPM, it's more of the individual choices, more of the personal interests. Okay, but in this model, it put emphasis on the public interest. Okay, the whole society. Okay, what is the most concern for the society? Not just because you as a customer or client and you have the money, then you will be served. No. So in this model, we take care of public interests. Okay, and then value citizenships over entrepreneurships. Okay, meaning to say that they, like I mentioned earlier on, it takes into account what people want, what people need, the society, not just certain segment of the population who, for instance, have money, for example. Okay, and then think strategically and act democratically. So I'll explain about this point later on. And then recognize that accountability is not simple. Okay, one thing about accountability in public service is that in traditional PA or in NPM, they tend to oversimplify the accountability. But accountability in public service, NPS, it is much more complicated. Okay, so this is another thing that is very important. Okay, serve rather than steer. So serving according to NPM or traditional model is more of the designing or implementing public policy. Okay, but steering in the context of NPS, it is more of to involve in terms of policy development, which means that also taking into considerations what the people or what the society wants. Later on, when you talk about things like this, it might be confusing, but later on I'll give you an example what it means. Okay, and then value people and not just productivity, which is also a very important element, because especially in NPM model, they usually concern with productivity. innovative ways on how to achieve good results, right? But NPS is also play important role, put an extra emphasis on the people, including not only the citizens, but also civil servants who are tasked to implement public policies. Okay, so NPM, productivity, when we talk about key performer indicators, about KPI and things like that. But NPS also argue that besides productivity, besides KPIs, there are other things that is also important, which is the people elements. Okay, all right. Okay, the next one is, if you read the book from Den Hart and Den Hart, New Public Service, throughout the book, you will come across what they define, or what they call as democratic citizenships. Okay, so what does it mean by democratic citizenship? So again, the emphasis on individuals that are much more actively engaged in governance.
Itu di story-nya
That's why
Kak Irwan kan hari ini dia itu habis selesai.
I think someone is not muting the mic. Okay, now. All right. So which means that public participation, where public participation process where citizens engage in governance or in policy development is very crucial in NPS. Okay, so should see citizen as citizens. Okay, this is the point that I mentioned earlier on, that they see people as citizens, not merely as customers or voters. Okay, so and then should share authority and reduce control in terms of collaborations. I'll explain about collaborations towards the end of my presentations. Okay, sorry. And then public managers seek greater responsiveness and corresponding increase in citizens' trust. So public managers is not just about implementing public policies or giving orders to the what we call lower level civil servants. Okay, but at the same time, this model argue that public managers, they should also seek the feedback or the response from the people regarding certain policies or certain programs, and things like that. Because this model argue, if public agencies or public managers engage with the people out there, then it will increase the trust from citizens toward the government agencies. Because, as we all I think pretty aware, a lot of citizens, and this is not just a problem in Indonesia or Malaysia, but also throughout the world, where citizens are increasingly losing trust towards the government. Okay, and so trust is very crucial in public agencies, in public service. And this model argue that in order to increase trust among citizens toward the government agencies or public service, then government agencies, public service, they need to engage with citizens. Okay, all right. So the goals, very simple, as I mentioned. This is a pretty, I think it's pretty common when we talk about the goals of NPS or the goals of any models in public service. Because ultimately the goals of public service is to deliver services to the public more efficiently, more effectively, more responsively, right? But I think in this model, the goals, it tends to expand in a sense that it also wants to build communities and also engaging the citizens, all right? So because this is sort of like the pillar of NPS, communities and citizens. So if you take care of these two things, then you should be able to make government or public service works more effectively and efficiently, all right? So that's why I think in other words, how you look at NPS is that citizens and community is sort of like the center, at the center of it, you know, so it's at the heart of it, you know, in order for government to work more effectively. Okay. All right, moving on. So this is just basically to explain a little bit about why community and civil societies are important, not just about, you know, individual interests, but also the interests of the people. Okay, I'm pretty sure you know, you heard about NGOs or civil societies. I have to admit that I'm not entirely familiar with civil societies in Indonesia. Perhaps you can share with me later on. But I do quite familiar with some of the civil societies or NGOs in Indonesia in terms of, because I do a lot of work. My research revolves around active transport policy. And so I'm quite aware of the sustainable transport or cycling to work communities in Indonesia. So this group usually are what we call the civil societies. Okay, so actually, you know, when I did my research on you know, cycling policy, I'm pretty impressed with the NGOs and civil societies in Indonesia. With these bike to work, what we call NGOs and civil societies, because they are very aggressive, you know, in campaigning for you know, people to use bicycle to work and to run errands, you know. So because I look at sort of like the comparisons, you know, between Malaysians NGOs bike to work community versus Indonesians you know, bike to work community. And I have to say that I'm really impressed with the how these NGOs and civil societies work. But I'm not entirely sure whether these people have some sort of engagement with with the government or not. Okay, but I think next week perhaps I can share more on that, about, you know, civil societies and bike to work community in Malaysia in our topic next week. Okay. Okay, I think I'm just repeating myself here in terms of personal interest and versus a community or civil society or the people concerns. Okay, now this is also important. The what we call the NPS. You know, we talk about public money. Okay, you know, taxpayers' money, right? And so they look at it as how the money, public money, should be spent towards the benefits of the citizens. Okay, not just because what, you know, the agency thinks that it is important, you know, in certain areas, or we need to spend this money. Okay, like for example, like building more roads or highways, for example, right? So we have this issue at least in Penang, where the government is actually trying to build more roads and highways in Penang. And so because they are going to spend people's money, right? But in reality, so the government agencies are thinking, you know, they are thinking that, yeah, we should spend public money, taxpayers' money to build more roads and highway. But in reality, is it serving the people interest or the community interest, for example? You know, because there are people out there that do not agree with how government is spending the money. Okay, and that's why this is where public participations or citizen engagement is very crucial. Okay, so I will share about these issues next week. Okay, all right. And then what else? Government can play an important and critical role in creating, facilitating, and supporting these connections between citizens and their communities. Okay, again, it's all about engaging the people. Okay, and then governance must be based on sincere and open discourse among all parties, including citizens and administrators. Now, this is one thing that we have to be aware. You know, talking about theory, it's always nice on paper, right? Because that's the reality of theory or models. And models, you know, if we read about it, oh yeah, you know, it looks nice on paper, okay? But when it comes to implementations, that's where a lot of problems will come in, okay? So it's not easy to implement whatever the models advocate for, okay? Like for example, in this statement, okay, it says that governance must be based on sincere and open discourse. Okay, it looks so simple, right? Open discourse, meaning to say, oh, you know, bring everyone to the table and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the issues. Okay, what is the problem and how do we solve this problem? But this is not easy. You know, in reality, inviting people to the table and discussing about certain problem, you know, societal issues is not easy as it sounds. Okay, even you know, just taking inviting people, we do not know who are actually wants to come to this discussion. Okay, and then getting feedback from them probably could be easier, but okay, then what happened after we get the feedback from these people on how to solve this issue? How the government agencies should respond to it? Are we going to take this feedback into considerations? Are we going to implement it? How do we go about it, right? So it is much more complicated than what it is presented, okay? So I think that is the issues when we talk about, you know, theories and models, you know, including NPS as well. Okay. Okay. So I think this is I'm almost done with my presentation. So in a nutshell, NPS it recognizes that engaged and enlightened citizenship is critical to democratic governance. Okay. It assumes that people has the right to say. People have the rights to be involved in governance, you know, be it making policy, developing policy, implementing policies. People have the rights, even if they cannot directly involve, but they have the rights to know what's going on. Okay, let's say, you know, like my example just now, if the government were to build more roads and highways, I think society needs to know what goes into the plan. Okay, where do you want to build it? How much does it cost? Okay, what are the implications of this project, for example? Okay, so NPS really emphasis on this particular element. All right. And then 6, shared and common interests through dialogue and citizen engagement. And then desire to serve others to achieve public objective. Again, I also repeating myself here by bringing everyone to the table and serve citizen in a manner that recognizes the complex layers of responsibility, ethics, and accountability. Okay. All right. Is this the final? Okay, I have one more slide. So, okay, I think in the first or in the second slide, I mentioned about collaborations, right? And so while collaboration is also very much encouraged in NPS, it also recognizes that it is not as easy to collaborate. So when I say that, you know, government agencies, they can seek people's opinion or people's feedback, this is what we call engaging the people, but at the same time, it is also involved the elements of collaborations. Okay, so usually when we talk about collaborations in public service, it tends to involve not only individual person out there, but also sometimes a group of people, like I mentioned earlier on, civil society, NGOs, and things like that. And also, do not forget what we call the private sector. Okay, so in this kind of collaborations for public service, we have too many actors sometimes. Okay, we have so-called stakeholders or actors, you know, to be involved in governance, or in terms of implementing public policies, or in terms of you know, doing programs for the people and things like that. Okay, and when we talk about collaborations, okay, governments can no longer afford to work in silo, which means that they cannot work just on their own. All right, so this is where they have to open the door and seek everyone's opinion. Okay, sometimes governments, they tend to work in silo, which means that just by themselves. And so this is where a lot of issues can happen. They don't work with other agencies, they don't work with other departments. And, especially when it comes to implementing public policy, this is very dangerous, because I think everyone should know what is happening. Okay, so they can no longer afford to work in silo. All right. And the last point here is about performance measurement. Now, performance measurement doesn't really, it's still mentioned in NPS, but more so, it was a big thing in NPM. Okay, because if you look at how private sector works, it's always about performance measurement. Okay, because they have the goal, they want to achieve the goal, and then they want to measure it, right? Because private sector, the goal is to get more profits, right? To be more, to get more, profit oriented. Okay, but profit oriented is not about public service. Okay, public service is not all about profit. Okay, so that is the big difference between public sector and private sector. But still, performance is still very much measured in public service. And so, but NPS, new public service model, it suggests that public service still measure their performance, but not by profits or numbers or KPIs. But also they should put elements of, again, citizens, people, society. Okay, so which means that people have the right to evaluate government performance. Okay, how you let people evaluate government performance. Okay, there are many ways. I think nowadays government agencies, they tend to ask the people how do they rate their performance. And sometimes government agencies also, they open to what we call that feedback forms, and things like that. You can also fill in the forms via online and things like that. So there are many ways on how people can actually measure the performance of government agencies or public service. And I think the most common what we call measurement is number of complaints that government agencies receive from the public. Like, if you are, if you have to fill in forms like the short video that I show you, then of course you will feel like, oh, this is useless, right? I'm going to complain to this agency. Why do I need to fill in a lot of forms, right? And then, it happens in Malaysia sometimes, in my university as well. Like, you fill in forms online. Okay, so that's okay. But then the department asks you to send in the hard copy, right? So, it's very, it's not convenient. It's such a hassle. Why would you do it online if you want to print it out and send a hard copy to them? It's sort of like doing more works, right? So that is kind of things what we call red tape that is to some extent is quite ridiculous. Okay, so you do not want these things to happen in government agencies, right? And so maybe, in that sense, you want to send in a complaint, maybe you would say that, okay, I fill in the form online, then why would I have to print out and send a hard copy to you? Okay, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so that's sort of a measurement. Okay, all right, okay, finally, now when you talk about NPS or any models or theories in public service, okay, in general, we have to understand the complex nature of public service or government, okay, in terms of its values, in terms of the environment, in terms of the size of public service itself, as well as the culture of public service. So it's very complicated and it's very complex. Okay, and that's why there is no one size that fits all. Okay, there is no one model that would fit any government agencies. All right, so these are the things that also Den Hart, the scholars that came up with this model, also argue, in a sense that there's you cannot just say that, oh, my department in UMY, for example, we want to adopt this model. No, it's not going to happen that way. It's not as straightforward as that. Okay, because how government works, how public service works, is that there are a little bit of elements, different elements of models here and there. Okay, and that's why if you look at, I'm not entirely sure about how Indonesian public service works, but at least in Malaysia, you will see like the elements of traditional public service, and then you will see the elements of NPMs, and more increasingly, you will see the elements of NPS in terms of what we call public participation or citizen engagement. Okay, so next week, we are going to talk about the practical aspect of NPS, which is public participation or citizen engagement. So, you know, maybe you can share with me how citizen participation works in Indonesia. So, you know, when we talk about public participation, it's a very general term, right? So what we are focusing in this lecture is that what we call the interaction between citizens and government agencies. Okay, because if we look at from the political aspect, election, for example, voting is also part of public participation, right? Volunteering, okay, volunteerism, for example, is also part of public participation. But what we are looking specifically in this class is that the interactions between government agencies, public service, public sector, whatever you want to call it, with the citizens, be it individuals or civil societies or NGOs. How this group of entities interact with each other. Okay, so that is the what we call the thing that we are going to discuss next week. So today we just focus on the theoretical aspect of NPS, and next week we are looking more of the practical aspect of it. So hopefully, if you're still confused, don't worry about it, because perhaps next week you will see you have better understanding about NPS when we talk more of the practical aspect of it. Okay, so so thank you very much for your attention. So if you have any questions, or you know, whatever it is you want to share your opinion, feel free to do so. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Nadhrah, for giving a very excellent lecture on public service, new public service. Class, we have learned from Dr. Nadhrah on public service, how is the paradigm from new public management and then shifting to new public services. How is the characteristic of the new public service, and how the complexity of new public service itself. So it is all about the theoretical foundation of new public service. I hope you understand about our lecture today from Dr. Nadhrah. So if you have any question, please raise your hand here, so we know who will talk, who will raising question here. Salma.
Yes, can I ask why only developing country has such complicated steps to receive public service?
Dr. Nadhrah.
Sorry, I don't quite get why.
Yeah.
And can you please repeat why? I think in terms of why government agencies are complicated. Is that your question?
Oh, I'll just type it down the chat then. Wait, because I hear some.
Yeah, there's an echo.
Maybe you can make your question clearly, Salma. What is the point of your question? Hello, Salma. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I can see the.
Yeah. She is typing her question.
Why only developing countries?
Why only developing countries have such complicated steps for people to receive public service?
All right. So I think you can, it's not really it's not fair to say this only happen in developing countries. Because I think that the issues of red tape is also happening in other countries as well, whether developed countries or developing countries. But I think it's the issues. Okay. Um, so there are many factors to it. I think that it's more. I would say that it's more of the culture of the public service in certain countries. That's how you do it. Like for example, I can give you an example from Malaysia. Okay, we always have these issues of people complaining that service delays. Okay, it's too slow. Okay, so that is the issues of red tape. But over time, there are a lot of people who are actually suggesting ways on how do we solve these service delivery delays. But it's still happening, because again, like I said, it depends on a lot of factors. Sometimes it depends on your top management. Okay, if top management is really serious about reducing the time, for example, to give a service, then they should be able to do it. Like for example, now we have online everything, right? You can receive services via online. I do not know in Indonesia how it works, but in Malaysia at least, if I were to renew my driving license, for example, okay, I can do it online, and they will send me the new driving license the next day. So that's pretty fast, okay, compared to if you need to receive your driving license. If you go to the department, okay, transport department, for example, you have to queue, you have to wait, you have to fill in form. But now you can renew your license at your comfort, in your comfort environment, okay, in your office, at home. You can just fill in details online, you pay online, and they will deliver to you the next day. All right, so that is I think that is it depends. I think it also takes a lot of political will from the public managers as well. Okay, I have heard much of. Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah. Very good question, Dr. Nadhrah. I think Sama already, have heard all of your explanation. Okay, from my students who are attending offline class here, any question?
How many of the offline class students?
Now it's around nine
Okay,
students. Yeah.
so
Any
mostly
question?
mostly
Yeah.
online.
I will invite who wants to raise question here to sit beside me, so Dr. Nadhrah can see you, able to see you. Hello, anybody? Oh, sorry, they are maybe still too shy to address the
Okay,
question.
sorry.
Okay, Mbak Nur Sahira or maybe Mbak Yomi or Pak Trapsi, maybe want to address question. Mbak Nurul Hasfiza, any question?
No question.
No question. All of you already clear with what
Yeah,
Dr.
I think so.
Nadhrah explaining. Okay.
I mean, like,
And,
if you feel not clear about NPS, because we're only talking about theory, next week we are going to talk more about the practice. Okay, okay, so maybe
okay.
you have better understanding.
Yeah. It is good steps, I think, from the theoretical to practices. How is the practices in Malaysia, particularly?
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Nadhrah. Okay, if there is no question, then maybe Dr. Nadhrah can move to other lecture. Maybe he has another appointment.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Dr. Dia, for organizing, hosting this meeting today. So I'll see you next week, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, because just now I have a meeting before the class, so I have to finish it before the class. Okay, Dr. Nadhrah, if students, there is no question anymore.
Okay, I'll see you next week.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nadhrah.
Thank
Assalamualaikum
you.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Salam. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.